Good morning.
Good morning, Cynthia. How are you?
Well, I'm great now that we got live, and I'm excited to be here with you, Kesha Lien, fashionably late for LinkedIn Live this morning. For anybody that's tuning in, thanks for joining us, or if you're watching later. My name is Cynthia Forstman. I'm one of the co-founders of Culture Talk. And I'm super excited this morning to be joined by Kesha Lien, who is one of our certified Culture Talk partners. Kesha, you're calling in from Minneapolis this morning.
Yep, we've got a fresh foot of snow on the ground. So we've got a lot of people in my neck of the woods are having a snow day today.
Wow. Wow. And now I've heard that it did get cold here in Denver as well, but not as much snow. So
we're used to it.
I bet you are. Yeah. Well, this is a venue, Thursdays with Culture Talk, that we run every couple of weeks to have conversations about workplace culture and how do we make workplace culture a tangible business asset, and what are all of the different ways that culture impacts businesses and can be leveraged by businesses for things like branding, hiring, employee engagement, M&A activity, et cetera. So we have lots of well-rounded conversations here on Culture Talk. And today we're actually wrapping up a 2-month stint we have been doing on the topic of brand and experience. What is the connection between culture and brand and experience? And we invited Kesha here today because a couple of years ago, Kesha was just getting her business started, and I'm going to let her share her story as well. And she found us, and now she's at a stage in her business where she's really starting to see some momentum with the framework that we use at Culture Talk called Archetypes. So Kesha, welcome. And yeah, maybe we could start just by having you share a little bit of what were you up to 3 years ago when you jumped on an airplane and came to Denver?
Yeah, so I left my corporate role in 2018 and I started Brickhouse, and essentially what I was going to do was what people were asking for, which is kind of like the sexy marketing stuff, right? So logos, websites, social media support, branded content, things like that. So I started doing that, started working with clients, and very early on, I realized that they had no larger plan for how they wanted to show up. And there's a million ways that someone can show up in their business, right? And without something to kind of guide your decisions, you're really just guessing. So I'm like, okay, well, I need to pause. I need to retool my business. And I really wanted to solve this problem because I've been in marketing for almost 20 years. I've sat in every seat around the table. And this is a very, very common problem that can really have long lasting effects on how a business, markets themselves. So I stopped everything and I started focusing on brand strategy. But there was still that kind of missing piece, like how, as much as I know about marketing, I cannot get into somebody's head and figure out how they want to show up. It's kind of one of those things where people don't know how they want to show up until you show them something and they're like, oh no, that's not it. That's not it at all. So I was looking and I was familiar with archetypes. I had seen the kind of like 10 question quizzes online, but to me, being a sage, 10 questions is not enough to really capture, somebody's personality or the culture of an organization. So I started, Googling and searching, came across Culture Talk, and it was probably like an hour from the point where I found Culture Talk to the point where I emailed you and was like, hey, I know the certification is like next week. I'd love to be a part of it. Bought my ticket and I was on my way to Denver to get certified. It happened that quick, but I just knew, from doing this work for so long that this was kind of like the smoking gun that I was looking for, the thing that was really going to help me.
Yeah, I love that you call it the missing piece too. Like, how do you get inside of, right? There's so many different ways that any business owner can be positioned
Right.
and how you start to like make that a more strategic action. I love that you tied in your own archetype. So Kesha is a high sage, and as you think about sage as a pattern, this is the kind of pattern that wants like data, that wants good, solid ground proof, right? Which, as part of the Culture Talk assessments, you're able to lean into that kind of proof and data that makes a sage happy. I also love, because another one of Kesha's archetypes is explorer. And explorer is a pattern that is looking, out across the horizon to go, what is the new idea that I need to go and get and bring back? And there's this willingness kind of to jump into the unknown. It's kind of, and sage and explorer together is kind of an interesting tension, right? Because one is going to move and find, and one is going to sit and study. And so I love that you have both to bring to your clients as you moved forward.
Yeah, the explorer helps me not get stuck in my analysis of everything. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, right. Like we're all these nuanced, right? Kinds of, and your third archetype, we'll just mention it for now too, is creator, which is so perfect for someone who has a background in design and now in the whole brand and creative strategy world. So talk to me, you came out to Denver, we were still doing live certification programs. That was pre-pandemic, and that was such a fun group that we had. You went back, and how did you now have access to use 2 different assessment tools and a body of work. Tell us what was the process of getting that integrated into your own, Brickhouse Creative process?
Yeah. I feel like I always just had a spot for it. I didn't have anything to put there. So I immediately started implementing it. And the awesome thing is that it works for individuals if I'm working with someone on a personal brand, or it works, for organizations, small to large. So that was really important in my decision to go with Culture Talk. But I started implementing it immediately. So the first thing I do is really take a look at like the more strategic aspects of a brand, like what's out there, what are the opportunities, what's going on in the market. And then once you've gathered all of that research, all that data and proof, right, you get to the point where you're like, okay, well, how do I express all of this? How do I turn this into words and images that are really going to reinforce and communicate who I am instead of work against it? And I found that a lot. Like there's a lot of people that are really unhappy with the way that their marketing shows up. And it's because they don't have anything to help guide their decisions or help bring that into focus. And so that's what I love about archetypes. They're a serious shortcut, because without them, it's a kind of a painful process figuring out how someone or how an organization ticks, how they like to talk about what they do. Traditionally in my corporate role, I learned how to do that through millions of red lines. So I would write something and it would come back to me. No, I don't like this word, change this. And like, that is a very painful process, and it's incredibly wasteful. I don't like wasting my time. I don't like wasting my money. Clients don't either. And so having a way to kind of like skip over those really hard, painful lessons and get to the good stuff, that's what I like about it.
Wow. It is painful. And I think also, when there are a lot of revisions and red lines and that guesswork is in there, I think that clients, whether they're in-house and internal, or they're your own clients for your practice, it like puts all this doubt in their mind too. Like it takes away the certainty that what you're doing, right? Exactly. Because you got it wrong. And we're like now trying to clean up the best of what's ever left in the pile, as opposed to, I love that you describe it as a shortcut to getting inside of somebody's head. So give us an example. Can you walk us through like an example with a client? You don't have to name them per se, but like, how does a client respond when you bring this into the process?
I think that somehow they just all intuitively get what it is that I'm doing with it. And I think that they like it because it's not just useful for the matter at hand, right? Which is building their brand and kind of defining what that is. But they learn about themselves And they also learn about how they interact with other people. So when I look at someone, when somebody takes the survey and I look at their archetypal profile, I don't just use it to help them build the brand. I use it so that I understand them. It allows me to kind of, so like, let's say I'm working with a ruler, right? I know how they operate, and I know that there maybe are a few things that I can tweak about my own process and how I communicate, to make them feel more comfortable with the process and how it unfolds. For some odd reason, and maybe it's not that odd, but most of my clients have that very high magician, right? So this is just, I think there's something unique about the magician and maybe the creator pair. Like, you know, you've got the visionary and then you've got the person that wants to like get in and build it from the ground up. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways to use it. But I think that my clients, they all instinctively understand what it is. It's very easy. You don't need to take a special course to figure it out. It's all just right there.
Yeah. And then as I'm hearing you talk about that client relationship and getting off on a solid foot with them, I'm imagining that that even in conversations about their strategy, you can, say, hey, we made these decisions, or here's what we're thinking because we're trying to express this aspect of you tied to this pattern. Or tell us a little, like, is there like ways of looking at what's missing perhaps for them because they're so zoned in on a particular archetype?
Yeah, I think what I found is, well, there's always things missing, and usually it's them. People, when you don't have a guide, you're just guessing, and there's a million ways that you can do something. And again, without that guide, you're kind of like testing it out in real time. So everything you create, whether it's a social media post or content for your website, it's always slightly off, and it's always slightly different from the thing you posted before. There's no real consistency there because you haven't worked out how you want to express yourself. And so like that is really important. I think when you're building a brand, you have to have that consistency, because when you're all over the place, you're literally confusing your audience, right? Every time there's a shift in your message or your visuals, like you're kind of throwing them off a little bit. So that consistency piece is really important.
And I think when you and I spoke previously, you even said, like, now you're so committed to this process of creating that really strong foundation for a brand strategy that you kind of can't even take on projects unless that's part of it.
No, once you know how effective something is, like there's just no other way for me to do the work. It would take so much longer, and the results they would never be as solid, because it's really hard. It's even hard for me to communicate how much is embodied in those archetypes.
Yeah.
It's really hard to like put that all into words.
Yeah, I'm thinking back because any people who might know Teresa or I, who are the co-founders of Culture Talk, we came into this whole world of culture through the doorway we call brand. And I remember that moment in our business as a brand agency when it was like, you can't skip this step in the process or I can't deliver. You're looking at you're looking at my portfolio, you're talking to references, and you want me to deliver that, but I can't deliver that without this very key foundational step.
Yeah.
So it's a really fun place to be, right? To know. Yeah. And sages love to know.
Yeah. And I think the clients that I've had that have gone through this process, if we called them up right now and asked them, I bet you they would say they can't imagine getting to where they are right now without that piece of the puzzle, because it really is like people, they want to be heard, but they also, more importantly, they want to be understood. And this allows that to happen. And it's not just in words. I came into marketing through design, right? And so as a designer, any other graphic designers know we're typically the last people to touch something, right? So if something comes to me and there's all these missing foundational elements, it's really, really hard to do my job well. It's hard for me to nail the design, the logo, whatever it is. Like I have nothing. And so I think this probably makes me unique, but I'm not just creating a brand strategy for the brands that I'm working with, I'm creating them for the marketing professionals that they're going to engage down the road, because I know what it's like to try to do that job without it's really, really difficult. And if I would have had, I'm really creating what I always wanted, what I always needed to do my job well. And
got you. So
I'm solving my own pain.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. I love that. I love that you're solving your own pain, even as you're helping clients really solve that mystery of unlocking, getting inside of their head and creating that foundation. I wanted, because we promoted this as kind of like from strategy to scaling. So I think we've touched a little bit on kind of how do we use it at the front end of a brand strategy? How does the archetypes and the culture talk assessments help you frame that for a client and get that strong foundation? What happens from there? Yeah. You know, over time, what are you experiencing? Because now, how many years have you been working with this? 3 years?
4.
Oh God, time flies.
It does, especially when 2 years are kind of all stuck together. So when it comes to the scaling piece, I just kind of mentioned that I'm creating these documents for, the strategies for marketing professionals that are going to work with these brands. And a lot of times, that takes on a whole different thing. But what it does is it allows a copywriter, a photographer, anybody can look at this document and they have the pieces they need to do their job effectively. And that's when scale really starts to happen. Like if you're using it alone and you're DIYing your marketing and you have this strategy, it's very valuable, but you're eventually going to get to a point where it's not going to be just you doing the work. And so you want to have something that you can give them that articulates everything, and they are going to appreciate it. But the things that are in that brand strategy, the personality, all of those things, those are foundational things that you need to do anything in marketing. You can't skip that. And again, if you do, it's going to really, that's called taking the scenic route when it comes to marketing. And most people, they don't want to do that. And so when you have a way to communicate who you are and you have something to give these people, you're able to scale efficiently, because without it, they're like me being the designer, the last person to touch something. Oh, there's all these foundational gaps, and they're working to try to backfill those. And it's just, it's wildly inefficient.
I know sometimes when people hear about using archetypes in brand, Kesha, their concern or their worry is that, it's somehow going to like limit them, right? It's going to lock them in. And I wonder if you could comment on scaling from the standpoint of not feeling locked in.
Yeah, I have yet to find a way that archetypes lock me in. Again, Culture Talk leverages kind of the top 3. So that's unique. Again, it reflects that humans are much more dynamic and nuanced than one archetype can provide. But the other thing is, thinking about how dynamic that is. I'm sorry. Yeah. I started going off in my mind about like, I was going to go on another thing. Keep me focused.
Well, yeah, I just want to hear about kind of how do you continue to apply an archetypal profile in a business, in a brand?
Yes. And not locking you in.
Yeah. Like what are the different ways that you might apply it or continue to build it out?
Yep. So once you have that profile, you do the strategy, right? Most times you kind of nail down that voice. That's one of the first steps. But then after that, there's a ton of other ways to use it. One is design, right? So you can leverage those archetypes in the psychology to select your colors, your shapes, even layouts, right? So thinking about a website, a ruler might be very structured, where another archetype, a gesture, might be a little bit more loose. All of these things can help you make those decisions. Again, without something to help you make those decisions, yes, you have a lot of options, but it makes it really hard to pick one. And again, you're going to just be guessing. And so it really narrows down a world of options into something that makes sense. I'm thinking about a whole other ways to use archetypes I haven't seen before. One example would be sound. Think about all the instruments and sound bites that are out there, right? how do you choose one to pair with the logo? So thinking about sonic branding, that communicates all of the things, right? I don't know that I would ever be able to hone in on what that is without the archetypes, because again, there's just too many options. And I really feel like when people are afraid and they feel like they're going to be boxed in, it's because they don't know and they need the archetypes. And that would be my answer.
Yeah, well, and we did talk about sonic branding, you and I know that's kind of like your explorer out there again, looking at just what's over the horizon. Talk to us a little bit more about why you think sound as a brand element is something that business should be thinking about right now.
Yeah, I mean, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we delivered a static logo package, right? Things weren't moving. We weren't doing as much video. And now we're all over the place. You and I are doing a LinkedIn Live. People are posting content. People are walking across the stage and delivering keynotes. And sound is sound and movement. So animated logos with sound. And we see this in like Netflix and Hulu. When you hear that sound, somebody just turned on Netflix in the living room, right? I think it's a natural progression. Like as we've moved into the future and we're doing all of these things where you can see and hear, it makes sense that sound would be a part of that. And the thing that I am really excited about is when you talk about sonic branding, that has always been something that's been reserved for really big companies, right? That have big budgets. But with the archetypes and being able to hone in with like laser focus on what we're trying to communicate, I think it makes it possible for smaller companies and even individuals to have assets like this in their, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know you mentioned that some of the clients that you work with are kind of subject matter experts, thought leaders that are kind of creating their platform, if you will, and that those are the people that are often giving keynotes and need kind of support in terms of sound. I know we'd be really curious about thinking about Culture Talk. What is the right, message that really supports what we're doing out in the world? So that's a super exciting thing. What about, let's talk scale one more way, Kesha, because you mentioned some of your clients that you worked with originally, like they're growing and now they're hiring, right? Now they're scaling their own businesses. How are you, how is the work you've done with them around their archetypes and their brands supporting that next level of growth for clients?
Yeah. So thinking about what it is, whether you're hiring someone to support you in-house or you're outsourcing, right? Yeah. Again, there needs to be some kind of handoff. And I don't know any client that has days and days and days to try to explain to this person what it is that they're all about. And this gives them a way to communicate that. And it again, they're very easy to understand. They don't need to go out and learn something new to understand what the archetypes is about. And that's it's funny to say that, but and we're all stretched very thin. Nobody has time for that. Nobody wants to spend all that time rehashing, because then what happens is that first person that you outsource to or that you hire, you have that conversation with them. Well, then you have to do that every single time you bring somebody in. You have to have that long, probably confusing explanation of who you are and how you operate. And this is really just, again, it's that shortcut to understanding. It allows the handoff. It's a handoff.
Yeah. I remember clients that we would work with that found it really challenging as the team grew to make sure that the team knew how to talk about the company. Right? Because they hadn't really, like the founder knew in her mind how to present the company, but then she would hear other people on the phone or see other people out at a networking event, and they didn't really have a really solid handle on that. So it became like a giant game of telephone, right? Everybody said it just a little bit differently. So I think, some of the things I'm really appreciating in this conversation is like, it's a shortcut. Even though it's going to take time at the front end, even though you might have to invest a little bit more at the front end, you can't jump to the logo. You can't jump to website? How many people call
You can, you absolutely can, but it will be, I kind of refer to that as low hanging fruit, because when you don't have that depth, things become very surface level. So your logo might be very literal instead of something more conceptual and meaningful to you. That you absolutely can. You can do these things without archetypes, but I'm telling you, it will be painful and it will be more time consuming. It will be more expensive. And the thing that really gets me is, and this is probably why I do this work, but I see so many business leaders, marketing leaders doing amazing things, right? And really struggling with marketing. And what happens is they get frustrated and the marketing almost becomes a barrier to opportunities. Like, think if you were, if somebody's listening right now and they're like, they don't feel like they're really showing up in their marketing, they don't feel like they're present, they could be missing opportunities, and so just to, and that to me is, probably the worst thing is when people are ready and they deserve these bigger and better opportunities, but there's this thing that's holding them back, and it's that they're not showing up in a way that honors all of that they are.
Hey, wow. I love the way you expressed it too, in terms of it becomes a barrier. So I'm ready for the business. I'm ready for this moment and I'm ready to grow into this, but people can't even get to me because I don't feel like myself, or I don't feel like my marketing is representing. And so there's this awkward, awkward state, if you will, when that's at play. But I think, again, if I went back, it's like, there's this, it may take longer at the front end to do this strategic piece, but you're saying with archetypes, there's a shortcut, right? Like, you're going to make that investment, but if you don't, you're going to pay longer over time. You're going to take all those side roads that are going to places that aren't where you want to go.
Yeah.
And
there's no way to quantify how much time is wasted.
And money.
I wish that I could come up with a number, but it's so inefficient. And again, like, not having that piece of the pie, you struggle in all areas. Yeah. And I think a lot of people they simply don't know that. It's not that they've made a decision not to do something. It's just that they are unaware that there's a better way.
Kesha, tell us what kind of clients you like. What kind of clients are a good fit for Brickhouse Creative?
So I think that my ideal clients, one, they want to move beyond these kind of surface level connections. They want to step outside the kind of like status quo for how people show up in their industry. They want to connect with people on a deeper level. One. Two, they're doing some type of meaningful work. I found that people that, are really engaged in the brand development process, they are very concerned about how they come across. They're doing something and they really want people to understand, why it matters and that it does matter. And then the other piece is also, again, where people are they've maybe outgrown all of their DIY marketing strategies, their templates, and they're really ready to take that next step and a client used these words, not me, but she said, I'm ready for my teenage brand. So she's even left room in there for the next level, which I'm assuming is the grown-up brand. But, people that are at those kind of pivotal moments, and people that are really struggling with, that feeling of like, I know what I'm doing matters and it's awesome and I deliver this awesome service, but this is not communicated in my marketing.
People just don't get me, or my current marketing, whatever I'm doing, people just aren't getting who I am. Okay. And where's the best place for them to reach you? We can add under the live stream here a link to your website. I think your LinkedIn profile. Are those the two best places to connect?
Yep. It'd be brickhousecreate.com or sending me a message on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, we really appreciate you taking the time to share kind of what you've been doing up to since the certification in Culture Talk. And I want to mention to anybody who's listening that we are getting ready to launch our next certification class. They're all online now. It's an 8-week, 2-hour-a-week program. And our next sessions and cohorts are kicking off on March 7th. So we'll have 8 Tuesdays where we connect with people like Kesha, consultants in other areas that are doing management consulting, maybe people in HR consulting, M&A work, anything that touches kind of that deeper space of who am I and who are we and why does this matter and how does it all connect in terms of thinking about the kinds of cultures and companies that we want to create. So we'll also throw the links to our certification program in the comments. If you have an interest in learning more, you can also reach out to me directly. So
and anyone in the brand space, feel free to send me a message if you have any questions about Culture Talk or the certification process. I'd be more than happy to share that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kesha, because we do get people that want to talk to somebody who's been through it and really get the inside scoop. So appreciate you being here. Have a beautiful rest of your day. Stay warm.
Thank you.
And thanks all for joining us this morning.